Joining us now to discuss the current threats and Israel's next steps, particularly in Gaza, is Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, Director of the Intelligence Methodology Research Institute at Misgav Institute and the Director of the Project on Regional Middle East Developments at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking you if you could explain a little bit more about why the IDF needs to redeploy some of these forces in Gaza and what it means for Gaza in the longer term, if anything.
Well, I think we realized even beforehand, but definitely after having to arrest 240 operatives of Hamas in Jabalia area, and after being the target of the launching of rockets from the Beit Hanun area, that we are not yet at the point of defeating Hamas entirely from the military point of view. So more power needs to be invested in this effort. And I was talking about that again and again in the last couple of months. And finally, there's an understanding from the military that this has to be done. And we need to bring in more power in order to convince, first of all, to defeat Hamas, and secondly, to convince Hamas that there is no way out, and they have to show some more flexibility on the talks about the hostages release.
Now, in the raids that occurred this week, we saw at the hospital in Gaza that there were reports of Hamas terrorists pretending to be patients, embedding with civilians. 240 total were arrested. Is this type of behavior consistent with what we've seen from Hamas? And how is the IDF able to determine who is Hamas and who is not on the ground in these situations?
Well, it's very characteristic of Hamas to do that. We saw that in previous cases in which we entered the hospitals, they were trying to impersonate sick people and avoid being arrested by Israel. And it's beyond that. They use the hospitals, the clinics, the schools, everything that is can be used as a place to hide and think that they are going to be protected and immune from Israeli attack as their hideouts and centers of command. And that is repeating itself again and again and again. So I think that by now everybody understands that when we talk about an Israeli military operation in a hospital, it's not against the patients, it's against the Hamas terrorists who are taking advantage of these places. And the fact that we found there 240 members of Hamas tells you how secure they felt and how they were under the assumption, working under the assumption that Israel is not going to do anything against them at this point.
Absolutely. I think it's important to note as well that each of these individual violations by Hamas are actually war crimes in and of themselves. But moving on to the hostage negotiations, I mean, we've seen a lot of back and forth. But one of the things that was stated by senior Israeli officials was that Israel believes they'll have more maneuverability starting January 20th, the day that Trump takes office. Do you have any guess as to what that may look like? What levers can Israel pull on January 20th that perhaps they cannot now in order to pressure Hamas to surrender, to release the hostages, to end this war?
Well, I think one thing that can be a game changer is that if after January 20th, Israel is going to be able to take control of the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. Because once we do that, then Hamas loses its main source of income, and may finally understand that the best way they can do, the best thing they can do about the hostages is to release them in exchange for safety somewhere outside of Gaza. All these efforts that, to convince Hamas that this is the case until now fell short of convincing them that this is the case, because they continue to be in control of the delivery of humanitarian aid and use it in order to fill their coffers. And that's something that delays the ability to reach an agreement. So I hope with the new attitude of the American administration, it will be possible to move in this direction.
All right, well, we are out of time, but thank you, Brigadier General Kuperwasser, for joining us today, and as always.
Thank you, Emily.